Hello, YouTube and live listeners. We are live. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 15 minutes and you will be at the beginning. This is the pre-show. Off we go. All right. We've got updated website. Let's see how audio sounds. Okay. Test, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's listen in to the show and see what it sounds like on my live page. Let's make sure we can get there from my live page. And what's it sound like? And you will be at the beginning. This is the pre-show. That sounds pretty good. I like it. Let's start recording our backup, one of our backup recordings. Get that going, because I will forget in 15 minutes. The new calendar is the chat room's talking about is at professormesser.com/calendar. Also, calendar events are on the right side toolbar, sidebar of the website. And I did not build it myself. I simply acquired it from someone who can develop much better than I ever could. So we will let them do all the heavy lifting. But I need a good calendar because now we do this event. Now we're doing all kinds of things. I'm gonna do a grab there. Where's the grab here? I need a different grab to grab. I need to grab this one over here. I'm referring to a function on my TriCaster where I grab a screenshot so I can use that later. I mean, I can go back through the replay and grab it off the video feed, but it's so much easier just click a button, isn't it? If you're watching this live on YouTube, we have a chat room at the bottom of every page on my website. If you go to professormesser.com/live, you will be able to watch and participate in the chat. I have Socrative already up and running. You can even see it over my shoulder here. Go to Socrative.com. Click on the student link and go to the Professor Messer room. Make sure you spell it right. Spell it right. We should have email reminders, Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus going out in about 6.5 minutes. 6.5 minutes, and we got stuff happening. All right. Viper bar is updated. Chat room is here. That's good. Okay. Oh, do we have a presentation? Let's do a camera check, shall we? I think we shall. All right. Here's camera 1. That's not camera 1. That's camera 1. Hi, everybody. Camera 2. The bird cam. Camera 3 is my desktop. Camera 4 is my laptop. Camera 3 with an inset, that would be me. Hi. Camera 4 with the inset. Later on, we will do this with the phone lines. Phone lines will be open in the second half of the show. And that looks great. Oh, where's our graphic? Does our graphic work? Yes, it does. All right. All the cameras are working. The audio is working. The stream is working. And are people joining us now? Let's see how the stream is looking. Let's see. Analytics. Yeah, we got people watching the stream. Hello, everyone. This is being broadcasted in 720p HD. So for those of you not watching on the HD side, you can click that and watch HD if you really, 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 really want to. But YouTube's nice. They will make it anything you want. So that part's easy. Beverage, I've already done a vocal zone. Vocal zone. Can't even see that from where you are because of the... So we're good there. Phones are off. I need a checklist. It's like launching a rocket of some kind. It's like a pre-check for a flight. I need to get rid of that mess of wires down by my feet. It really is a bunch of stuff on the floor. I just got brackets to go onto my ceiling so I can hang all of my lights, and all of that will finally be going away. Because the rest of the wiring in here is not bad. It's pretty good. Work hard on that. Last thing I want to worry about is a wiring problem. I write a bit of code as well, Jeremy. I try to get a few things going. Currently doing a lot with some other programming languages. Fortunately, no rockets. There is no propellant. There's no liquid oxygen anywhere. We're not lighting the candle. I could light a candle. There actually is a candle back here. Can't see it. It's on top of the mantle. So I guess technically we could light a candle. Not quite the same as lighting an actual rocket, though, is it? It is. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of things here. A lot of moving parts. Can't even see the audio stuff down here to my left. You can kind of see as I talk. You can see the VU meters going back and forth. The recorders, Cylon recorders that I have here. And we talked, I think last week about doing a tour of the studio so I could show people what we have here, what we're doing. It's all good. We are about 8 minutes out. 8 minutes out, Mr. Sinatra. Let's see, do I have everything I need here? Yes, I do. You folks are coming into Socrative just fine. So at least one person will be watching. I will not be doing a study group to an empty room. Fortunately, this will all be recorded later. I usually start my recordings up, though, so that when you're watching it, it jumps ahead through all of this. But of course, you could go back and watch this because this is gripping content. Oh, I spend a lot of time on cable management. It's probably not the most pristine you will ever see in the world, but everything is tied up neatly. I have up under my desk, I have installed these big C's, these C cable holders. They're C as in the letter C, so that I've got my power and my data separated out, and they run underneath, so there's nothing on the floor. And because I have two, I have a rack to my left and a rack to my right. A lot of the video and audio and networking is on the left, and on the right side is some network attached storage and the recording systems and some other things. Kind of my working side is on the right side. The left side is the sort of the infrastructure side. Audio processors. What else? What is in here? We've got an audio processor. We've got a switch, 28 port switch, of which I'm using many of the ports. I have a headphone amp, TriCaster, and my audio system, my Axia Radius audio, IP audio system. And that's all that's on that side. And there's in the back of it is my video matrix switch. So I can have all the video into the matrix switch, and then I can direct where it goes. So you can see a lot of video that's in front of me. There's video up on a screen you can't really see. There's video from my screen that goes into that. So I'm able to send all of the video to the right place just by clicking on a few things on my screen. And I can take certain video feeds and send them to multiple outputs. So it's just seamless and painless and beautiful, and it works like a champ. But they put out quite a bit of heat. So these are quiet racks, they call them, and they have a lot of padding on the inside. They close up completely. There are fans that pull air from the bottom and push it out the back, and they're very quiet fans. You can't hear them at all, which is why I got them. I got them when I did not have a separate room, it's more of a large closet I now call my data center, which is in a different part. It's over in the other side. You can't even see it from this camera angle. And now I have a rack in there. I've got a full-size 19-inch rack. I could put all of the equipment in there if I wanted, but it's so nice having it all so close because you can keep your cable runs much shorter. There's only one chat, and you're in it. This is the right chat, which you'll hear me say in just a moment or two. Takes 30 seconds or so. About 4 minutes. We'll get there. These are up and running. I'm going to go ahead and start my other local recording now, so don't forget that. Yeah, I can type and talk at the same time, but don't expect either of them to be correct. All right. It was very quiet there for a moment. Wasn't saying anything. It was very uncomfortable. It's like, is it working? Is the audio working? Yes, it's working fine. It's just fine. Okay. We are 3 minutes out. So tweets went out. Yes, they did. So by now, all the Twitter people should be arriving. Let's check our analytics and see where we are. There's people. Hello, people. They're showing up. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of weird that I will do it, I will say it, I will type it, and 30 seconds later you finally get to see it. But the chat, you get to see 30 seconds earlier, obviously, which is pretty messed up. I'd love to have something that was a little bit faster, but YouTube is, what's the word I'm looking for? Free. YouTube is free, and a 30-second delay is not so horrible. I've now come to work with it. I would kind of like to use a system that's a little bit faster with its updates. And I've looked at that. You got to pay for that, big time money to pay for that. Oh, well, thank you for your support of the study guide. I'm going to show you more about the study guide on this particular user group. It's a big study guide. The Security Plus is a huge study guide. There's a lot to know in Security Plus. Much more memorization of topics than there is in the others, in the A Plus and Network Plus, and saying the others, in every other. And they're $10 for the PDF study guide. Download immediately. I'll show you how on this study group. Or you can go to the top of the web page. Under Security Plus is a link for the Security Plus course notes. Course notes seems to describe a little better what they are. A lot of people have study guides. I think a lot of people think of that as a book. So they see, oh, you have a book? No, I have a study guide. So it's not a study guide. It's really course notes. I think that's a much better description. All the notes for my course notes. I know we spent a long time on the branding, just huge amounts of meetings. Should we call them course notes? Okay, that was it. I think we're eating pizza. Meeting over. There's a delay because the video input goes to YouTube. They then transcode it into many different streams so that you can watch on a mobile device, on a low definition device, on a high definition device, and that time frame for the transcoding takes time for that to occur, and that is why that happens. All right, I think we're ready to do a thing. So let's get this going. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2015 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. I talk like we've done this so many times already, haven't I? This is actually our very first brand new premiere episode of our Security Plus study groups. Of course, we've done A Plus study groups and Network Plus study groups for years now, but this is the very first time that we've been able to carve out the proper amount of time to do a study group for Security Plus that would be good. So we could have done one a long time ago. Then it would have been really bad. So it was good to wait this long so you could have a study group that was actually reasonable, something that you could look at and actually learn something from. And that's the goal here, of course, is to do that as well. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you're watching this on a replay, thanks for joining us on the replay as well. We're going to do a lot of live things during the study group, so there's probably some information. If you're watching on replay, you won't be able to participate in our interactive Q&A, but you will be able to at least follow along. I'll show everyone who's watching live how to do the interactive Q&A in just a moment. There is quite a bit going on with our Security Plus. Security Plus is a very popular certification. It is one that you can find out more about if you'd like the offline version of my Security Plus course. You go to ProfessorMesser.com/GetSecPlus. But as you know, all of my videos on all of my courses are available to watch absolutely free. Someone this week was asking me, how much does it cost to go to these live study groups you do? I hear it's $300 to attend one of your live study groups. I wish that was the case. It's actually free. With 5,000 replays of a study group, I would love to get $300, but at the moment, it's absolutely free, and there's no plans to change that. So I've also got a Twitter feed you can follow at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at /YouTube, and discounted vouchers. I always like to mention, if you're planning to take any CompTIA certification, including the Security Plus, you can find out more about a 10% discount right off the top at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. Never pay retail. You can automatically get a discount. Why wouldn't you if you're doing that? For those of you not familiar with the offline version of this course, everything's available to watch for free. But if you'd like to support the site, or you'd like to take these videos offline so that you can watch when you're not connected to the internet, I have that available for you as well. You can buy that at ProfessorMesser.com/GetSecPlus. It also includes MP3 files. Somebody was mentioning the other day, and they wish there was an MP3 version of this. I also offer just the MP3 files at a discounted cost. It's like half the cost if you just want audio to play in your car, something like that when you're driving to work. And my course notes, my very popular course notes, which people are already talking about in the chat room, are included when you get the offline course as well. So there's a little bonus there that you don't have to buy that extra study guide, these course notes, if you're doing that. So if you're following along live with us, make sure you get online, pop open a new window. You can even go to your mobile device and either go to Socrative.com in your mobile browser, or perhaps even easier, download the app for your mobile device from Google Play, from the App Store, from the Windows Store. You're looking for the Socrative Student app. This is what we're going to use to interactively do Q&A here today, and you'll be able to see this Q&A. In fact, I have one up right now. So right now, people are in Socrative. If you go to Socrative.com and go to the Professor Messer room, ProfessorMesser, all one word. I'll show this to you right now. There it is. The room name, Professor Messer. You go to that room name, and you'll be able to see this question, which is, how long have you been studying for your Security Plus certification? There is less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 9 months to a year, over a year, or perhaps you already have your Security Plus certification. So you can see that 19% of you already have your Security Plus certification. A number of you, 71% so far, less than 3 months. So I'll see you answering this in real time to be able to do that. Very, very useful to have that capability, because you do want to be able to study and get this information. Some of you, like me, already have your Security Plus certification, and it's not unusual in our study groups for people to show up and then want to be able to just start out watching the study group. So less than 3 months, 68% so far is a pretty good number. This is the question I'm asking right now. So this is really the test, so that you can get into Socrative, you can answer and see the information that's there. It's Socrative.com. Click the student login and go to the room name, Professor Messer. I spelled it out for you there. Probably should have thought of an easier room name, right? Instead of Professor Messer. You'll figure it out. If you don't see a question, you don't have this information come up, then you did not put the right name in. So you'll need to change that, go back, try to get into the right room. And we've got plenty of opportunities to do that as we go through the study group today. So this Security Plus certification, if you're just starting out, this version of the Security Plus certification is the SY0401. This was introduced in April of 2014. So it's been around just over a year now. And it's now getting into, I think, its stride, really. People now can see that all of the books are available for 401. My videos, of course, have been available for quite some time for the SY0 401. It's only a single exam. It's 90 minutes long. You can get a maximum of 90 questions. You may get fewer than 90 questions, depending on what type of performance-based questions they might give you, because they do ask not just multiple choice, but they ask a number of performance-based questions as well. These can be matching, multiple choice, putting things in order. They can be fill in the blank. They might pop you into a command prompt, although there's not a lot of command prompts on the Security Plus, but there's a lot of different things you may be faced with. And the score that you want to get is a 750, and it's an odd scale. The scale goes from 100 to 900, and we understand the questions may have different points depending on the question that's being asked, so that you can't really figure out a percentage. You're really starting at 100, and you think every question you get correct, it counts up, and as long as you have more than 750 points at the end of this, you're in good shape. So if you're studying for your Security Plus, also make sure you get the exam objectives, which you can see here. This is the first hour. We're going to ask a lot of questions from the Security Plus exam to see how much you know. And in the second half today, we'll go into the second part of the study group, where I just open up phone lines and we can really talk about anything you'd like. They're open phone lines at that point. We don't require that you talk about any particular topics there. So let's start with our first question. Let's go into this and talk about, I love these security questions because we've never really been able to do a lot of security questions before in the study group. So here is the question: what is the critical vulnerability associated with WPS? So for those of you that have followed a lot of the study groups that I do, I like to do questions that take you through multiple steps. So you have to first know there's a WPS and what that is. And then you have to know, obviously, there's some vulnerability associated with it. What is that vulnerability? And the vulnerability options that you will have: is it a denial of service? Is it a limited number of initialization vector or IV values? Does it have a limited passphrase length? Is there a cryptographic vulnerability, or is it susceptible to man in the middle? So all of these are rather significant vulnerabilities, but which one of these is specific to WPS? Now, if you think you know the answer, you'd like to try to see if you know the answer, pop open in browser, go to Socrative.com, click the student login, go to the room name Professor Messer, Professormesser. There it is on your screen, and you can try to answer this yourself and see which you think it might be. I'm going to peek at what people have done so far to see what those differences might be. I love starting off the Security Plus questions this way. A lot of questions that we got this month dealt with cryptography, dealt with vulnerabilities, dealt with some trying to find out if your system is susceptible. We will do that. Yeah, if you click the wrong one, you simply click it again and it turns it off. You can click another one if you'd like. You notice there's a lot of different options there as well. So let's see how we did with knowing what WPS vulnerability might be. How do we do? Let's find out. Well, 2% said definitely not denial of service. Well, 2% said it was denial of service. 98% of you, I guess, said definitely not denial of service. 16% said there was a limited number of IV values. 16% said there was a limited passphrase length. We go with the number one answer would be 45% said it was a cryptographic vulnerability, and 20% said man in the middle. So we're really all over the place with this particular question. What could this possibly be then? Let's learn more about WPS and what this really is. WPS stands for Wi-Fi Protected Setup. That's what WPS really is. This is a name. It used to be called Wi-Fi Simple Config. You may see other brand names associated with what this is, but almost everything these days uses Wi-Fi Protected Setup. And this was something that was introduced into Wi-Fi networking standards because many people felt that it was difficult to get connected to a wireless access point securely. You first have to configure the wireless access point with some type of passphrase, and passphrase has to be a certain length, or you have to know where to put it in the configuration. And then once you have that passphrase, you have to share that with everyone or every device that you happen to have in your place. This is something that can become a little bit difficult. So this is effectively an easy button. A lot of these devices, these wireless routers and access points, are set up so that there's a button on the front of it you click for WPS, or you simply get your device close to the access point and you put in a personal identification number that matches what's on the access point. And that is the problem, is that this personal identification number became a bit of an issue. There was an old method, you even used a USB key between devices. I think that made it more difficult, these USB keys. But the WPS ran into a problem. There was a significant design flaw with the WPS. This was not a cryptographic vulnerability. This was a vulnerability in how this particular feature was implemented onto an access point. This PIN that you would get is an 8-digit number. And what it consisted of really is 7 digits and a checksum bit at the end. So really you had to figure out 7 of those numbers. And you could think, well, I could go through 10,000 or 7 digits. You're going through 10 million different combinations. You think maybe I could run through those, but 10 million can take quite a while to go through to get into a device. Well, it turns out that WPS actually validated the PIN in 2 different pieces. It looked at the first part of the PIN and then the second part of the PIN. So it was no longer 10 million different iterations. It was now 10,000 for the first 4 numbers. And then because you only had 3 numbers, because the last bit is a checksum, then you have 1,000 possibilities for that. So really only 11,000 different possibilities. Well, that's an easy one to step through because now you can do a brute force attack on this. And if you do a brute force to go through every possible number that WPS could ever look at, you're looking at about 4 hours worth of work, which is nothing if you're trying to get into a wireless access point, especially one that might be at a business or an organization. If you have WPS turned on your wireless access point, everybody, when you're done here, go to your wireless access point, see if WPS is enabled. And if you can't find it, it might be called something a little bit different. Check with your router manufacturer and make sure that you can search for WPS. They will tell you how to turn it off. All new wireless devices do not enable WPS because of this vulnerability. It allowed everyone access to the network. That's a pretty significant problem. So when we look at what we answered for this one, it wasn't really denial of service. It wasn't bringing down the access point. This critical vulnerability was not a limited number of initialization vector values. In fact, that was the problem that we had with WEP, Wired Equivalent Privacy. There is a limited passphrase length is what the correct answer is then, because it was a limited number of pins that you could step through. If you answered, why does that say D? What happened to C, everyone? Where did my C go? There's a D, limited passphrase length. It is not a cryptographic vulnerability. There's not a problem with how it's encrypting, how it's decrypting, or how it's storing that information. So that's not the correct answer either. So the 45%, I relied on the people to tell me the highest number, that's the highest number. We didn't get it right that time. We're going to try better next time. And it's not man in the middle, although you should always be careful of a man in the middle type situation. For WPS, that was not the specific vulnerability associated with WPS. So there you go. That got us through our first question of the study group. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight into how WPS is implemented on or was implemented on these wireless devices. And again, make sure you've got WPS turned off on your devices. That's a pretty important one. Yeah, C is the one to always go with. What happened to C? It's not there. Threw myself for a loop. Let's do another question then. I've got another one for you. This one deals more with these 2 different kinds of technologies, Telnet and SSH. And I want to know, what's the most significant difference between Telnet and SSH? They're obviously 2 different things, but what is the biggest difference between those 2 things, Telnet and SSH? If you go out to Socrative.com, go to the Professor Messer room, you can answer the question if you're watching this live. Sorry for the folks doing the replay. Obviously, these questions won't be available live, but you can still follow along. Let's see if you happen to know the answer. At least I have the letters in order this time, A, B, C, and D. A is SSH provides additional emulation options. B is Telnet is supported on more operating systems. SSH provides additional security, or Telnet uses TCP and SSH uses UDP. So it's got to be one of those 2. Now, it's a pretty important thing for the Security Plus exam. There are a number of different technologies that you have to understand the differences between, and these are very well spelled out in the study group, in the course notes, or the CompTIA exam objectives. That's really the proper name of it. And if you go to professormesser.com/objectives, you can download the Security Plus objectives. I'll show these to you later on in the study group. Those objectives tell you everything. They tell you everything you need to know about the exam. If you can answer every topic that is on these CompTIA objectives, you're going to pass your exam. It's really that simple. You can use it as a checklist, go all the way down, and you'll know everything you need to know. So let's answer this question. What is the most significant difference between Telnet and SSH? And let's see how we did this time with some of these answers. You can see that 2% said that SSH provided additional emulation options. 2% said that Telnet supported on more operating systems. You can see that 83%, if we go with the majority this time, SSH provides additional security, but 13% said Telnet uses TCP and SSH uses UDP. So which one of these is it? Should we go with the big number again, or are we going to be disappointed? Let's find out. Let's step through what the differences are, and we'll know at the end of this if this is really the case. Telnet stands for Telecommunications Network or Telecommunication Network. Nobody ever calls it that. It's just Telnet. And Telnet is probably one of the very first methods we had to communicate to a device in a console at a command line. And you get a screen that looks like a lot like this one that I have here. It allows me to sit at my desk, connect to a remote device, and be able to use that device at the command line. And almost every operating system, many devices on your network will support Telnet. So you could run a Telnet application on your Windows desktop and connect to a device that is running a Telnet service. And you might be connecting to a router or a switch or a firewall or a server or any other devices that are out there. But one of the keys with Telnet that's important is that this communication between your device and that remote device is in the clear. It is not encrypted at all. So if you were to type in a username and password to log into that device, you would be able to capture those packets and see exactly what you're typing in. Every single letter. It's so easy to see exactly the username and password that is there. So if you are working on a router or a switch, really any device, in any network, I was going to say a production enterprise network, on your home network, you should not be using Telnet. This is not a technology anybody should be using any longer. If you're connecting to a device that's 20 years old, it might only support Telnet. Maybe that's the only case when you would ever want to use Telnet. In all other cases, you would want to use SSH. And all of those devices I just mentioned, routers and switches and firewalls, generally enable SSH by default. They generally have Telnet turned off. In some devices, nothing's turned on. You have to manually go to that device and turn on SSH or turn on Telnet yourself. And now you know not to turn on Telnet. You should enable SSH, which gives you the same experience. You're connecting at a console, you're connecting from your device, you're loading an SSH client, and you're connecting to an SSH service on this other device, and it effectively is giving you exactly the same user experience. It's a screen like this one, it's a console, it's command line, you can type things in, you get exactly the same emulation options. It feels and looks exactly the same as Telnet, except behind the scenes, the communication between this screen and that remote device is all encrypted. And that's why you will always use SSH to communicate to any device that's out on your network instead of Telnet, because SSH provides additional security. And if you're one of the 80% that answered C, SSH provides additional security, you would have got that one absolutely correct. Well, that's a pretty good start then. I feel pretty good about the answer for that one. Now, one of the things about the Security Plus exam is that it goes through a lot of terminology. This is an exam that is full of terminology. Most of the exam are very high-level topics that you need to understand about the way that enterprises use security or need to use security. So this next question I have for you is one of those. And the question is, which of these would be a false negative? And I'm asking you to pick two of these to determine which two of these are a false negative. Again, we have to know what some of these things are. of course, don't answer in the chat room. You can, of course, go to the Professor Messer Socrative page, Socrative.com. The room name is Professor Messer. Spell that one right, and you can get in, and you'll be able to answer two of these particular answers. Is it that a malware infected a computer without any warning or notification? Is it that an internal monthly financial spreadsheet file transfer is flagged as a virus? Is it that an antivirus application turns itself off every day at the same time? Is a false negative a buffer overflow attack that is not being logged on an IDS? Or is it that a known bad website is blocked in a URL filter? It's got to be two of these types of issues to be able to see this particular case. And whenever I start looking at terminology, you really have to consider going through what all of the different options might be. It's not good enough just to know what a false negative is. You have to know how to apply that false negative to things you would find in security. And these are concerns where you are definitely not worrying too much about just the name of it. You have to know how to apply it. And I think that applies to pretty much the entire Security Plus exam. Some folks in the chat room about the last one we were talking about, the Telnet and the SSH, saying IPsec doesn't secure Telnet. Well, in and of itself, Telnet is unsecured. And for the most part, the vast majority of communication on your network will not be IPsec communication. But obviously, IPsec communication, IP security, is an encrypted tunnel in most cases, in almost every case. And in that particular case, it would secure everything that goes through it, not just Telnet. Although, of course, if you're doing IPsec, at some point, it pops out of the tunnel. And at that point, it's now unsecure. It's now in the clear again. So one of those. Yes, pick two. See, this is why I like to do the pick one or pick two or pick three, because you will get questions in your exam that ask you to pick more than one thing. Now, the exam itself is going to give you a cue, a visual cue on the screen that it won't be a radio button anymore. It'll be a checkbox. And fortunately, the exam tells you if you've not answered the correct number. It did last time I took it. I'm probably telling too much about the exam at this point. I think that's a good one to go with for this. So let's see how we did with which one of these would be a false negative. And again, we're sort of all over the place with this one. Which one is it? What is this? We got to pick two of them. So obviously we won't know exactly the two that everyone's doing, but we've got kind of a nice distribution here, at least for the top four. The top four of these got 22, 24, 18, and 27%. A known bad website is blocked in the URL filter. No, only 10% answered that one. Maybe we'll throw that one out, but we've still got four to choose from. Which one of these then would be a false negative? Well, we should probably start at the top with what a false positive is. These are important things to consider, especially if you're managing intrusion prevention systems, firewalls, or anything else that might remove traffic from the network or identify problems with traffic on the network, antivirus, anti-malware. So a false positive, again, that's not what I asked for in this question, but a false positive is when you get a report that something is bad, that something happened on the network. Turns out, not true at all. That particular issue has been identified falsely. So it's one where you've got an IDS, for instance, that says, here's an alarm. I have found someone attempting a buffer overflow, and you go look at the communication and it's normal communication. Well, that's a false positive. It flagged this as a positive problem, as a problem, a positive issue on the network. I found an issue that I positively identified as a problem. And indeed, no, that's not correct at all. You did not find a problem. That false positive is quite an issue. Now, this is one, we see this quite often. One of the larger ones I could think of back in history, April 2010, where McAfee Antivirus updated the antivirus signatures. And unfortunately, the signatures flagged servicehost.exe as a virus. And of course, that's a core piece of Windows and Windows XP Service Pack 3 devices. Once the update was applied to McAfee Antivirus, which is something you tend to do all the time, you get your daily update, it thought Windows was a virus. And you can, everybody make your own joke at this point, but obviously it wasn't. McAfee removed the file, quarantined it, and of course that caused a system. If you rebooted the system, now it wouldn't boot properly. We were telling everybody, don't reboot. Let's go in and fix this problem because then you'd have to boot with another device, replace the file. Now you go back to A+. Here's where your A+ skills kick in. You're based on what's happening with Security Plus. This happened again October 2011. Security Essentials thought that Chrome was malware, was actually a pretty bad bot, CBot. Just deleted the whole browser. So those are false positives. There was nothing wrong here, but the security in place thought there was a problem, and that was an issue. So sometimes when this happens, you may want to double check, get a second opinion, and see what's there. Well, we want to know what a false negative is. Well, that's the opposite of a false positive. That's when you are looking for problems, you're looking for malware, you're looking for the buffer overflows, and you never hear a thing. And yet those buffer overflows got through your systems. They got through your antivirus. They got through your anti-malware, and you were never identified as having any type of problem whatsoever. A false negative in many cases is a little bit worse than a false positive. At least with a false positive, I can go back and see if this is really the case. And although it's annoying and it's not something you really want to have happen, you at least got some type of alarm and you were manually able to see, yes, that's not there. False negative, completely invisible to you. You have no idea that that particular problem happened. It got right through your IPS. It got through your next generation firewall. It got through your local anti-malware software. It got through everything. So that's why it's something that you don't want to have happen, because you never know it. It's completely silent. It never alarms anything. You can usually find other information about what the industry is seeing with certain files or certain processes by putting in a lab, running it through your IPS, running it through a firewall to see what you get when you start working with those things. But obviously a false negative is something that's a bit of an issue. Well, let's see how we did then on answering the question. If a malware infected a computer without any warning or notification, well, I did not get a notification. Absolutely a false negative, because I got infected. I heard nothing about it. An internal monthly financial spreadsheet is flagged as a virus. Well, obviously, this is an internal spreadsheet, happens every month. They transfer the file. That's a false positive, because it's really a benign, legitimate application, file, or process, and it's saying that it is not. So that one is not the correct answer. Let's try C. An antivirus application turns itself off every day at the same time. That's indicative of a malware infection, but in and of itself is not a false negative. I guess ultimately, after it turns itself off and malware gets in and you got no notification after that fact, maybe you could think of that as a false positive. That's not the case either. A buffer overflow attack not logged on an IPS, well, that would certainly be a false negative, because the buffer overflow got through my IPS and never told me that it was occurring. And a known bad website blocked in a URL filter, that's how it's supposed to work, isn't it? So that's actually something working exactly as you would expect. So if you answered A and you answered D, you would have gotten correct the two options to determine what a false negative might be. Well, if you're now looking at all these words and phrases and things associated with false positives and false negatives and all of the other things associated with the Security Plus, especially if you've downloaded the exam objectives, you'll see there is a ton of information to know about. You have to know so many different terms. You have to understand what all of these different things do on your network. And we've already talked about IPSs and firewalls and IDS, intrusion prevention, buffer overflows. We've talked about all kinds of WPS vulnerabilities. All of this is in the Security Plus exam objectives, and you have to know these things. So if you've gone through your exam objectives, you've watched the videos, you've gone through a book that you've read, but you would just like to get it's kind of a final update, you may want to consider getting my course notes. These are electronic PDF files that when you purchase them are immediately available for download, and they have inside of them every bit of notes that I can gather from all of my videos, taken everything that I feel is really important, and I've collapsed it into these course notes. The Security Plus course notes are bigger than any of the course notes that I've ever created. This is 36 pages in length. Look at all the port numbers you have to know for the Security Plus, and they're in here. The OSI model, it's in here. All of these things that you have to worry about knowing for the Security Plus are in there. The iPad is not included. Thank you, chat room. With this security course notes, the $10 that you would pay does not include the actual tablet device. It is simply a PDF file, but I think you knew that. There is a lot there. Security Plus. And of course, every dollar of this goes back to support the website and lets me keep making videos. This is all I do, is these live updates, these live study groups. I do my live videos or my courses that I put out for you to watch for absolutely free. And this goes back to helping support what we do here as well. You can find out more about this at professormesser.com/securitycn. That's security course notes. And you can also go to the top of the Professor Messer website under Security Plus, and there's a link there also for the Security Plus course notes. So thank you for your support. A lot of you in the chat room said, oh, I already have them. They're awesome. And of course, you throughout the month, I see people that are also purchasing them as well. Thank you so much for your support. It really does go a long way to keeping things running here. So thanks again. Okay, back to the questions. Let's get some more of these questions down. I need to flip over on my side so I can show these questions to you on your Socrative, and you'll see it pop up that asks you about trust. So which of these enables your browser to trust a particular website? No answering in the chat room. You can go and see the Socrative.com, go to the room name Professor Messer, and I've got a number of options available for you when we're talking about trust. Which one of these allows your browser to trust a particular website? We're really talking about the security term trust here. So we have to find the best answer. This is something that you will commonly get on your Security Plus exam, is you'll get a number of answers. Some of them you could actually be correct technically by choosing that answer, but the exam wants you to choose the best answer for what it's asking. So there should be a very clear one that's jumping out at you, especially if you understand what trust means from a browser's perspective. Is the answer A, cookies? Is it B, encryption key? Is it a certificate authority, a browser cache, or is it executable permissions? One of these enables your browser to trust a particular website. And I think BSOD in the chat room's right. Trust nobody. In fact, we can have a very long conversation about trust and browsers and how they operate and how the good parts and the bad parts are set up. No system is perfect. But of course, we have a particular method that we use in our browsers to trust other websites. So we should absolutely do that. So let's see if we go out to Socrative and go to the Professor Messer room, we can see how we do with this. Now, if you recall on the first question I asked, we definitely didn't get the majority on that one. In the last question I asked, we were so close to different things that are out there. In this particular instance, though, there is a very clear particular choice that people are choosing. But is it the right choice? So you can see that 93% of you have said certificate authority. I think I spelled that correctly. Only 2% said cookies. Only 3% said encryption key. 0% said browser cache. How could I have even put that one in there? I fooled nobody with that one. And then 2% said executable permissions. So we need to look at this and not only determine what the right answer is, but we should go through these and determine why the others were not the best choice for this particular question either. So again, no mentioning of this in chat room, although now I'm pretty much going to give you the correct answer, which is certificate authority. I think we all figured that one out based on the number of people who were talking about this piece. There is quite a bit that your browser has to do to be able to set up encryption and indeed trust these sites out there. And the method that we have in place is that we have created these public certificate authorities. These organizations have been granted effectively the permission to create or sign our encryption certificates. And when they sign them, they are therefore trusted by your browser. There's a series of certificate authority certificates that are in your browser right now. They're on your system. They're on your computer. They were included with your browser. And all of these certificate authorities that are in there are the ones that you should trust. In fact, if you have an organization that's making their own certificate authority, they will take their public certificate and put it on all of their devices so that all of those devices can trust the internal CA. This certificate authority is something that becomes very important whenever you're ready to now have your encryption key trusted by someone. You have to create that key and send it to a certificate authority, and the certificate authority digitally signs it. And that's it. The certificate authority is not doing very much more than that. All it's doing is validating that I trust this particular encryption certificate that has been provided to me. A really good certificate authority, and you'll notice in your browser there's different levels of trust. A really good certificate authority will check in and see, are you the person at this organization? Where is this organization? Let me talk to you on the phone. Let's do a Skype call. There's a lot of extremes you can go to really determine if a CA really trusts somebody. When I created my certificates on my website that I was using, I provided them to a certificate authority. I paid them money and they signed them. That's how a certificate authority does business. And they didn't check anything. They didn't check to see if I was who I said I was. They did check to see if the emails that we were sending back and forth were based on the certificate, the domain name and the certificate that I was trying to get. But boy, it can really be an issue. There has been certificate authorities in the past that have malware has gotten inside of those. The bad guys get in those organizations, and they were able to create any certificate they wanted, and it was trusted. So they were able to create Apple certificates, Google certificates, Microsoft certificates, and the certificate authority had to be shut down because nobody could trust the CA any longer. It was a significant problem, and that's where the CA, the certificate authority idea, falls down. That's one of the disadvantages you have. You will have to look at the certificate that's there. If you go to my website now and do it via HTTPS, you'll see that I'm using a front end that's a certificate that's being used on a reverse proxy. So you're not even hitting my website. I have internal, of course, encryption between that device and my website. But boy, it really comes in handy to have that third party managing the certificates and having someone sign off on them so they're trusted by your browser. You could create your own certificate authority. You just have to make sure that when you build and sign these certificates, that your certificate authority certificate is also in all of your browsers, or else the browsers won't trust them either. So you can create your own certificates every day. In fact, create one that is a Professor Messer certificate. You put it on your browser, and anytime somebody tries to go to that device, it'll flag it and go, I can't trust that you're Professor Messer because you have not been signed by a CA that I can trust. It's one of those things that comes in very handy. If you're using the Windows Certificate Services or OpenCA, there's a lot of organizations that have their own internal certificate authority. They just have to make sure that all of the browsers that are being used in their organization has a copy of that CA certificate on their devices. So it's a bit of a management hassle to do that, but you can make as many certificates as you'd like. So no question, if you one of those people that answered C, certificate authority, those 92%, you got in there absolutely correctly. That was a pretty obvious one. Now, it wasn't cookies. Cookies is something that a third-party site, once you are trusted, can put information on your machine that would allow you to effectively authenticate to that device without having to put in a username and password. We also store other information there, but that by itself is not trust. Something had to happen first before that authentication could be put there. There is also encryption keys themselves have nothing to do with trust. They're just a way to encrypt information back and forth. It's the CA signing the encryption information, the encryption certificate, that adds the trust to the entire conversation. Browser cache, all of you pretty much realize there's nothing you can trust about a browser cache. And executable permissions are about the executables you run locally on your device, and if you can trust them. In fact, some executables have signatures, digital signatures on them as well. But here we're talking about trusting a particular website, not a particular executable on your device. So that's where we came up with that answer C, certificate authority, and that's the one we were looking for in this case. Let's do another question. I got more. We got more questions to go through. There is quite a bit to look at from security. As I mentioned, there's a lot of different things to know about from a security perspective, especially on the Security Plus exam. Here's another example of what this would be. we have to know what this is. Which of these best describe the process of causing an exception by sending random input to an application? So we're causing an application exception. We're sending just a bunch of random stuff to an app, and we're causing that app to crash. So one of these best describes, notice that term, best description, because that is exactly where you want to answer, is find the best possible one that describes this. You got a number of options available. Don't answer in the chat room. There's buffer overflow, there's database injection, application patch management, fuzzing, or server-side validation. It's got to be one of these, right? It's got to be something associated with those pieces. So it's got to be one of those. So we have to understand this terminology and how we would use this terminology. In fact, we need to understand we're going to cause an exception to an app. We want to start sending random inputs into the app. What is that called? That's what we're looking for. For those of you in the chat room, there is quite a bit here. I'm using Firefox. There's no Tor here. Tor is just Tor is a very good way to encrypt information to a certain point, but Tor in and of itself is not secure. And what we found is it's not secure at all, really. There's so many ways to get into Tor traffic that they've done a great job. The malware guys have done a great job at grabbing that data. So I don't use Tor. It's that is a waste of time for me. So let's learn more about this. In fact, I may be able to start up an application on my screen and have this application go through the process of sending data to an app. I'm going to start this up on my screen right now. I've got a VM here that's going to run, and the name of the VM itself should help you understand what the answer is. So we're going to see how we did with this one first. Buffer overflow, database injection, and fuzzing are really the top three. And you can see as I start up this VM of mine, here it is. I've downloaded this VM from, I think this is the CERT Fuzzer, and it's going through a particular file configuration that I have, and it's running through and sending a bunch of information into an app. It's effectively an automated process to completely send garbagey stuff into an app. And in fact, this one so far has even managed to crash it at least once. You can see it as this information is going by on the screen with these details. It will give you a input and output of what it's doing and how much it was able to do. And see, crashes 0, up, crashes 1. You're able to get a crash out of that app. So if you have a particular app that you'd like to just slam a bunch of nonsense into and see what happens, this is something that you can use. In fact, they have used this individual app itself to find a number of problems with Android applications. There's a nice article I was just reading about that. And this is something that's available to work around, play around with as a VM. We're just going to have it run there on that particular piece. Obviously, what we're doing here is fuzzing. This is a remarkable functionality to be able to use and find problems with an app. In fact, most times when there is an app that's being developed, they tend to take the last application that was in use and start sending nonsense into the app because they know somebody's going to do it if they're not. That's what fuzzing really is. You're really looking to see if the app will do something wrong. Somebody should be really doing a much better job at managing input, at cleaning the input that comes into an application. If you're not cleaning or sanitizing that input, then your application may do things that are completely unexpected. And it may be something simple like just crashing the app, or it may be something where the application itself is allowing you access to things that you normally would not have access to. There's a lot of different ways to do fuzzing, a lot of different things you could do across different platforms and different applications. It just depends on what you want to use. I was just using the BFF, the Basic Fuzzing Framework. And this is from CERT. If you wanted to try this yourself, they've got VMs just like I downloaded. I downloaded the VM. I downloaded their fuzzing scripts. I loaded them on my machine. I started the VM and I got what you saw there. So very, very simple to have that there. You can find it at cert.org/download/BFF. So if we look at the answers we got on this one, it was not buffer overflow. A buffer overflow would mean that we're sending a very specific kind of input. In fact, it's a very large amount of input into an application to try to find a way for it to crash or to gain access to the application that normally we would not have access to. That is not random. It is something very specific, and that would not be the case. That would not be the best answer for this particular one. Is it a database injection? Well, again, that's not random input. That's a very specific kind of input that allows you to send your own SQL calls to an application. That one is definitely not random at all. You're sending very specific SQL code to be able to get through that particular application. And it's not application patch management. It's not server-side validation. It is fuzzing indeed. So the 32% of you that said fuzzing got that one absolutely correct. Well, we are sliding through these questions now. Let's do another one. This is just getting good. Since we're talking about applications and applications not working well, well, then we would like to be able to protect these applications and restrict the type of input that might be going into the application. So now that we understand what people are doing to find exceptions with our app, how can we stop that? So I want to know which of these would be the best way to validate user input that's going into an application. So that's what we want to be able to work on. This is a number of different things that you could use, but one of these is really going to be the best way to validate user input that's going into an application. Is it a WAF? Is it a packet filter? Is it an IPS? Is it a load balancer? Is it an IDS? Or is it a spam filter? So choose A, B, C, D, or E, and you can answer and give me your idea what you think the best way would be of validating and restricting user input to an application. You can go out to Socrative.com and you can go to the Professor Messer room to answer that one. So it's a bit of a follow-up from the last one that we did. This is another one of those questions very early on, the very beginning of the Security Plus exam. You have to know what all of these devices are so that you can then use those devices in the proper way inside of your network. So this is one of those that might help whenever you're trying to design a network, implement a type of security, and somebody's going to tell you, well, we need to validate input. In fact, if you are doing a credit card, I'm going to give you an example. This might even be a hint. A lot of the credit card standards for security include this kind of device so that this gives you another way to prevent somebody from gaining access to credit card information. So it's got to be one of these. Is it your WAF, your packet filter, your IPS, your load balancer, your IDS, or your spam filter? Let's see how we did. So in this case, the majority, 57%, said WAF, but we had a pretty nice group of people that said packet filter and double digits on IPS. We had single digits load balancer, IDS just squeaked up to 10%, and spam filter 8%. So one of these devices is going to validate user input. And in this particular case, the answer is going to be a web application firewall, or a WAF. This is something that is not really the same as a normal firewall, at least not the kind we traditionally think of, where we have packet filters, we're looking at port numbers, we're examining applications, and maybe performing additional security on top of those. The way a web application firewall works is that it's looking for people to use a web app, and whenever you're typing information in, you're typing in your name, your address, your credit card number, your social security number, whatever they're looking for in that application, this device is going to validate that information before it ever gets to the app. So you can think of this as a way to fix bad applications. It's not really fixing the bad applications, but it's a way to prevent bad applications from being taken advantage of, because you're going to do the user validation, the input validation at the web application firewall instead of relying on the developer to properly sanitize the input that's going into the application at runtime. So this is where you do want to think about what you can stop. You can stop things like SQL injection, because they will look for those SQL injection codes coming in, and they will not allow them to make their way into the web server itself for the web application. And as I mentioned, this is a big part of what they call PCI DSS, which is the payment card industry's data security standard. If you're working with credit cards at all, you're storing credit card information, then you have to comply with this PCI DSS. On my website, I take credit cards, but all of that information is passed to a third party. So there's very little PCI that I am specifically needing to maintain, because I don't store any credit card information. All of that is sent to a credit card clearinghouse, a credit card provider that I trust. In this case, it's PayPal, and they're the ones that are having to maintain that PCI DSS compliance. I don't have to do any of that, thankfully. with those pieces. And that's intentionally. I don't want your credit card numbers. Don't give me the keys to anything. I'm fine just being locked out of all those pieces. Well, there's a lot that you have to know with the Security Plus exam. You have to go through so many different parts of nomenclature. You have to understand definitions. You have to be able to work through and understand IPsec. You have to know what all these different devices do. You have to be able to work through different scenarios in security, especially with the performance-based questions. And so one of the things that I like to do is remind you that there are some options out there for setting up labs and working through these labs in real time in your browser. It's something that I call Freestyle. This is a product from GTS Learning, which are a partner of ours here at Professor Messer. This is a set of labs that have been set up to provide security capabilities and security lab testing. You can find out about this and get special pricing for it at professormesser.com/seclabs, SEC labs. So this is all done in a browser. All the labs are already set up. All the machines are already ready to go. There's Windows 7, there's Windows 8, there are domain controllers, there are certificate authorities, there's encryption processes there are browsers that are set up. You can run tests with database injections and IPSs and capture packets. There's a ton of different labs out here. I was playing around with that this weekend and going through. In fact, I've got one up on my screen now. I just launched all of these different servers. I have a data center domain controller. I've got a domain server. In fact, the domain controller just started up. I'm going to click on that domain controller. These are real live virtual machines that are running on this device. These are not emulations. These are actual devices that are running, and I can set up and follow along with the labs that they have here right on the screen. I can pop these out. I can even download them as PDFs if I would like, and tells me exactly what to do. This one's to set up an Active Directory certificate service so that if you wanted to go through that process of me being a certificate authority, you can load up the certificate authority software on your server and load up all the specific pieces, pull in some encryption certificates, sign them with your certificate authority, put them on a browser. It's all out there. And you can use this for free for an hour. So maybe you'd like to see if this is really for you. You can go do this right now. Go out to professormesser.com/seclabs. Not only use it free for an hour and see if it's for you. If it is for you, don't pay the $125 or I guess it's $159 that's out on the GTS Learning site. Special pricing if you follow my link. So that's important to know as well. That way, if you don't want to set up your own lab, set up your own machines, just that certificate authority lab had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 devices on it. And you can flip back and forth between them. Here's the Windows 8 device. Here's the Windows 7 device. We'll start that one up. And now I'll go to my Windows 7 device, create a certificate that I want to have signed. I'll go to my domain controller, start up the certificate software, sign it, pop down to my Windows 8, try to browse to that machine, see if the certificate is trusted properly. That's the way to do it, all with those virtual machines. Find out more at professormesser.com/seclabs. And I want to thank GTS Learning for supporting what we do here at Professor Messer. We've got a lot more questions to go through in such a little amount of time. So let's see if we can do a couple more here. I've got a few more queued up in my list. This next question is, which of these would restrict mobile device camera use in the office but allow it outside the building? This is something you may want to commonly have. I was going to a facility on a trip one time. I was performing some work inside of a building, and it was a government contractor. And the government contractor said, you can't bring your phone in because it has a camera on it. We aren't allowing any cameras in the building, so you've got to either leave that here at the front desk or go put it back in your car. And so that was just something. Try to walk around without your phone all day. You get a little itchy. You have a little problem. I had to go out at lunch to my car so I could check email. I feel much better now. But you've got a lot of choices. You could do this automatically by using one of these types of technologies. Would it be MDM policies? Would it be MD5 hashes? Would it be key escrow? Would it be geofencing, or would it be TLS? One of these would restrict camera use in the office but allow it outside of the building. Make sure you go through and figure out those pieces as well. For those, you can go to Socrative.com, go to the Professor Messer room, and you can answer this one yourself. Before we did this study group, I was putting these together and realized very quickly there's no way I can get through any large amount of content on the Security Plus exam. This is one where you really have to go through and pick the things that people are most interested in and go through all of those in those pieces as well. Some people in the chat room are asking about the GTS Learning Live Labs. Yeah, if you want to set up your own VMs in your own machine and get it up and running and run through your own systems, absolutely do it yourself. But you're going to need licenses for all of those different operating systems. You're going to need a VM or set of VMs you can all run at the same time. Hopefully your machine is enough that it can handle all of those running at one time. And you're going to need a lab. It's not just enough to load up the operating systems. Now, install certificate authority. How do you do that? Well, you're going to need to know how so that you can go through that process. Or you can go through a lab that steps you step by step with screenshots, and that's the difference. And like I said, maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't. You can decide for yourself if that's something that makes sense for you. So let's see how we did with this particular question. We've got a lot of different options here. We've got which one of these would restrict mobile device camera use in the office but allow it outside of the building? And we want to look again for the best answer. That's what we have here. 63% of you said the best answer is MDM policies. Very few people, single digits for MD5 hashes, key escrow, and TLS. The other one that got any significant answer, 33% said geofencing. So we've got really one that was the most significant here. In fact, it was the majority is MDM policies. So is it really MDM policies? We should probably figure out how these things work. Camera use, in fact, is one that is kind of a big deal. I mentioned earlier about having cameras that you would definitely not want to have working inside of your building if you were a government contractor or you just had a security issue where you didn't want those there. But sometimes you want to be able to use that camera functionality. You could easily set up a mobile device manager policy that said camera doesn't work anywhere. But what if you leave? What if you go on vacation? What if you're at home? It'd be nice, especially if it was your device, that you could use your camera and take pictures of your family and take pictures of other things that are outside of the office. So we commonly see this being an issue for things like cameras and recording devices. It's either an all or nothing. Or you could use something called geofencing. Geofencing recognizes and understands where you are. And if it knows based on GPS or based on the triangulation of the different mobile towers or even through things like your mobile access points, and it knows where you are in the world, the policies in your device can determine whether different features might be available or not. So this is a pretty nifty use of doing this. And it's one that's completely automatic. You tell your devices through your mobile device manager, I want to enable geofencing. And if you're inside the building, if you're a mile anywhere from my building, or I don't know where you are, disable the camera. And if you're anywhere else in the world, you can turn it on. This also helps a lot for authentication. Maybe you have geofencing enabled or geolocation enabled to be able to allow access to certain applications. You can only run that application if you're in the building, if you're in the country. If you are outside the country, your phone got to North Korea somehow, that application won't work anymore because geofencing is enabled for that particular application. A really great capability, one that's very common to see, and something like an MDM policy is very static. It's one that either enables it or disables it. In this particular case, geofencing is the correct answer. If you answered D, geofencing, you would be absolutely correct. In fact, if you were watching this particular study group for continuing education unit credit, you would want to go to the top of ProfessorMesser.com, click on Contact Us, that's really Contact Me, and put somewhere in that message your name and the word geofencing, and I will send you back an email that digitally says you indeed watched this particular study group. There is a lot that we have to think about with the CompTIA Network Plus, Security Plus, A Plus exams. But fortunately, CompTIA has done a very, very good job of providing everything we need to know. And I mentioned this earlier, and I want to be sure to mention it again. I mentioned it on all of my study groups, is that I want to be sure you have everything ready to go. How do you even know when to walk in and take your exam if you don't know what you're going to be asked? So make sure you download the objectives. Go out to professormesser.com/objectives and download every single one of those. You're going to want to know exactly what those objectives might be, and that way you can use it as a master checklist. You'll know if, oh, it asks for geofencing. Yes, I know what geofencing is. Oh, it asks for a certificate authority. I know how a certificate authority is used. Oh, I have to understand what a WAF is. All right, I know what a WAF is. You can check that one off of your list. So there were a number of things we talked about today that are inside of those particular exam objectives, and you should be able to go through them as well. If I look at my exam objectives, I'll pull mine up on the screen so you can see these as well. Once you go out to professormesser.com/objectives, you can download these and look at them yourself. They'll look something like this. Here we go. Here's the exam objectives, and it even gives you a breakdown of what you'll be asked, very large domains, and what the percentage is of what you will be asked in those domains. But if you scroll down, the first section says implement security configuration parameters on network devices and other technologies, firewalls, routers, switches, load balancers, proxies, web security gateways, VPN concentrators, etc., etc., etc. Here's your web application firewall right here. So that's where you need to know. In fact, you need to know the difference between a web application firewall and a network firewall. I come from my last job was enterprise firewalls. It was doing tons of firewall work for years and years. And we would walk into the room and people would say, show us your WAF. Like, we don't have a WAF. Well, you have a firewall. Yes, but these are two very different things. So sometimes we walk into a room and we'd have nothing to show. Like, sorry, we called and you're not talking to the right people. You need a web application firewall because you have credit cards that you need to look at user input and do those type of things. So these are very important and very timely things to know for your Security Plus exam. And if you're going to be taking that Security Plus exam, make sure that you have gone through all of these exam objectives and print them out, read through them. Go through all of these pieces and really understand exactly what's going to be asked of you, because that's going to be a huge part of what you need to know for your certification. Well, that brings us to the end of our very first hour here of our Security Plus study group. And we've gone through quite a number of topics. If you're watching live, make sure you stick around. We have an hour of phone lines. I'll turn it on and you can call in and we'll talk about anything. It's just open phone lines. You could talk about Security Plus or anything else that's top of mind. If you'd like to, again, learn more about my course notes, you can find them at professormesser.com/securitycn. Of course, here's my YouTube, Twitter, Google Plus, and Facebook links. Just type in professormesser.com/Google Plus, /Facebook, /Twitter. You'll find everything that's there. And again, don't forget your voucher discounts at professormesser.com/vouchers. Again, thanks to the folks at GTS Learning for, there's the Net Labs. It's actually Sec Labs for Security Plus. We'll have to change that for next month. And I want to thank you as well. This was our very first study group. We had a fantastic turnout. The chat room has been awesome as usual, and asking such great questions and giving me a lot of problems about things that I spell wrong and letters that are missing in my questions, but that's half the fun of it anyway. I want to thank everyone for attending. We'll do another one of these. If you want to see when the next one is, go to professormesser.com/calendar, and you'll also be able to see all of the dates for the next couple of months or when we're doing all of our live study groups for A+, for Network Plus, and for Security Plus. So until then, we'll see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Thanks, everyone. Boy, that was very fast. That just went right through. I tried not to spend a lot of time on announcements and telling you about study guides and that type of thing. I've gotten your feedback. I've heard your feedback. You don't want to hear a lot about those things. I get it. But it does help me understand more about what's going on there. Well, let's get the phone lines open. Now you have to watch as I struggle through with opening these phone lines and getting Skype running and doing all of those pieces and figuring out what to type. Boop, 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 boop. I guess I should host a show, so I have some.
Thank you for calling Call-In Studios host and call.
You're welcome.
Please enter your show number.
I have to remember my show number. In fact, I have to find the thing to type in so I can show you my show number. I can't find it because it's on Skype. Here it is. It's probably arguing with me and complaining right now. Let's see if that's right.
Enter your 6-digit
Ha,
PIN number.
it worked. I don't remember my 6-digit. And again, all of us can complain about saying PIN number again. And we'll type that in and see what happens.
You have not started a show session in Calling Studio
Okay.
and cannot yet receive.
No, don't hang up.
Welcome, host. You are now in the host room.
All right, that's more like it. So I can show you this on the screen. Here we go. And studio line is open. So if you wanted to call in, you can call in 855-785-7545. That's 855-785-RJ45. You can call in. We're also taking questions from the chat room, and you have sent me a ton of questions for the Security Plus study group for those pieces as well. Yes, IPS is not IPsec. Isn't that difficult that we've named things so that way? Intrusion prevention system and IPsec or IP security are two very, very different things. An intrusion prevention system is a device or a piece of software that's watching all traffic go in and out of your network and determining if there's anything bad inside of that traffic, like intrusions, somebody doing a buffer overflow, a database injection, some other type of vulnerability attack is going to be stopped by an IPS. You can think of that as the first wave of blocking things as they're coming into your network, whereas IPsec is a protocol. It's a way of communicating to provide additional security of traffic going through your network. So there's a very quick difference to do that. Yes, it took me a while to find a number that I liked, and I stuck an RJ45 on the end. That was the one I liked the most whenever I was doing this and getting that going. We had a lot of questions for this. For those of you that are indeed watching this and want to get from the beginning, once this is over, our replay will be available immediately to be able to do that. And of course, if you're watching now and you didn't want to listen live to these things, there's a kind of a DVR function that you can take the end and go all the way back to the beginning if you really, really, really wanted to. For those pieces. Oh, you work for a SIM provider. So I worked with a lot of SIMs when I worked in my last position doing enterprise firewalls, next generation firewalls. Huge part of security. It should be a huger part of security. There are way too many people without a SIM that need a SIM. I know I'm kind of speaking directly to you and to the choir there, but there's so much you can get out of a SIM, and people just aren't taking advantage of all these log files and statistics and analytics that are out on their network to be able to get there. Yeah, Snort is a good IDS, in some ways IPS type of software. That would be a good thing to load up and try. If you want, that's a very basic functionality. These days, the vulnerabilities are very smart in how they're coming through, and some of the older style technologies like Snort aren't necessarily designed to capture some of the more advanced pieces of malware and attacks that you might receive, but it's a pretty good way to do that. Yeah, there are big differences between IDS and IPS. Yeah, next-gen firewalls are mentioned also in the Security Plus exam because think of the ways that traditionally firewalls worked. They worked based on a port number. If port 80 was coming through the network, allow it. Port 443 was coming through the network, allow it. If port 23 was coming through the network, don't allow it. And obviously, port numbers these days have nothing to do with the applications that are in use. Everybody's using port 80. So next generation firewalls, one of their basic, most fundamental things that they do is recognize the applications. They're able to determine and understand if somebody's using Microsoft SQL Server, if somebody's communicating via Facebook, if somebody's talking Twitter, if somebody is on LinkedIn, and it can separate all of those out. Even though all of those may be using port 80 or port 443 or some other port number, it knows what the application is based on the traffic going through because it's examining every one and every zero that passes through that device. It becomes a very smart device. Think of a protocol analyzer that now is a firewall. It knows everything about all the traffic going through your network. So not only can it find the applications, but it also knows things that are not application related, like malware, intrusions, buffer overflows, database injections, and much more. It does IPsec. Very, very powerful. It does not just mean packet analysis. Next-gen firewall goes well beyond that. It's more of a fundamental function of being able to break down and look at data at an application level, but then also what you do with it at that application level. In fact, the next-gen firewall can determine whether you're simply reading Twitter or whether you're posting to Twitter, and it can allow or disallow that particular action based on the policies you put inside the device. So very, very powerful. And you would think that it would slow things down quite a bit. Chat room's going, well, that'd be awful. That would take forever. No. Next-gen firewalls are all doing this in hardware. We're talking multi-gig throughputs, in some cases hundreds of gigs of throughputs that these devices can support because they're doing everything in the hardware. They're not using quad-core or 8-core or even 16-core CPUs. They're using multiple core CPUs inside of these devices. So they are able to go very, very fast, very, very quickly on these networks, and they're remarkable pieces of technology. The technology's been here for 6-7 years now. Very, very powerful stuff. So that's pretty good idea of what you might see. Security question from the chat room. Dale has the Network Plus, A Plus, Security Plus, and is looking at other things. Looking at other certs like CEH and CISSP. The Certified Ethical Hacker and CISSP are from two different places. Generally speaking, in the security industry, CISSP is the certification that everyone is looking for when you are getting into enterprise security. It is the one in the industry that everybody puts their green check mark on and says, yes, you've got a pretty darn good certification right there in CISSP. CEH, the Certified Ethical Hacker, sure sounds fancy. That sounds like a great one to have. I know what the hackers are doing, and in many ways the content within Certified Ethical Hackers certification are certainly interesting, and if you're getting into trying to understand what the hackers are doing, I could see where that would be useful, but generally speaking, it's not looked upon with the same amount of interest by the industry as something like CISSP might. And in fact, the folks that have the Certified Ethical Hacker certification have themselves been had a few things happen recently. For instance, their website was hacked, and what the hackers found is that a lot of the personal information that was provided to the folks at the Certified Ethical Hacker side at that organization, they were keeping this content even after you had gotten your certification. And they came up, I think it was Snowden's passport, a copy of his passport they were able to find in those records, which brought up the question of why is a security organization keeping your private information after they've done the validation of who you are? Shouldn't they have gotten rid of that? And the answer was yes, of course they should have. But that's one of those things that happens, and it certainly put a bad mark on that organization. It does not have quite the level of interest by the industry as others might. CISSP, though, is the one most people are indeed looking at as the primary cert, I think. That's one that when you get into dealing with these certifications and what they're doing, can be quite a challenge finding the right one. And in security, quite honestly, you need to have a very strong networking background before you even start looking at things like CISSP and some of the other security certifications. I see often a lot of people will start getting a lot of security certifications before they've even gotten in the industry. And I think you may be getting a lot of certs that might help you later, but they're not going to help you now. You first need to understand networking. When you get into IPS, you get into next generation firewalls, you start looking at some of the sandboxing functionality, anti-malware, anti-spam, all of these things associated with security on the network, web application firewalls, certificate authorities. Some of these next generation firewalls are doing decryption of SSL so that you're able to look inside encrypted communication. So there's a lot of certificates you have to set up. You have to understand the encryption process with browsers. All of that's really network related. You're not really into the security side as much. And eventually, once you get the very strong networking piece of it and you know where to install a firewall and how you want to put it into your network and how you create the different load balancing or fault tolerance between these devices, and you integrate it with your switches and your existing routers, now somebody's got a very strong networking fundamentals. And I think that's a great place to go for those types of things. So it's very useful to have that there. Chat room saying there's a sound problem. There's a problem with the sound. I'm not hearing any problems with sound here. Maybe somebody in the chat room can tell me, yeah, your sound is awful on those pieces. I'll be able to adjust things on this side, but I'm getting a pretty good feedback there for my side as well. We can always check to see how things are sounding on that side. I guess I could just bring it up myself since I've been talking for quite some time. I won't have to ask you if that's the case. Let's see if that's really what's going on. So it's very useful to have that there. Chat room saying there's nope, sounds good to me. I sound just fine. I sound great for those pieces. So if you are having a problem, that sounded awful to you, sounded great to me. I was pulling that feed in there. So the question about certifications, are what other certs would I recommend then outside of what's there, outside of security? Anything network related is going to help you in security. I wouldn't say necessarily A+, although I will tell you that if you're installing security devices and you're supporting and protecting other operating systems like Windows Server, Linux devices, web servers, certificate authorities, having an understanding of the operating system becomes really important. It's hard to manage a certificate authority server if you're someone who doesn't know how to work the operating system. And I have found this, that people who are very security savvy, if not everybody, but there's cases I have found where someone who is really knows security extremely well and is an expert at what they do may not be strong in the operating system side. And not everybody can know everything about everything, of course. But that's one of those cases where knowing more about how the operating systems work are going to help you manage what's happening on those operating systems and protect them ultimately for those pieces. Question in the chat room was about my course notes. My Security Plus course notes follow the videos that I created exactly, and those videos follow the exam objectives exactly. So in this particular case, A equals B and B equals C and A does equal C. The course notes follow or correspond to the things you need to know from the Security Plus exam objectives perfectly to be able to do that. There is other certifications in security. In fact, a lot of, when you get into security, it doesn't tend to be so much CISSP as it tends to be something more specific to the technologies you're using. So generally, something like the next generation firewall company will have their own certifications. So you can go get a Palo Alto Network certification, a Checkpoint certification, a Juniper certification for their firewalls. Maybe not Juniper so much anymore, but being able to get a certification from that organization. The same thing with Cisco. Cisco has a series of security certifications on their side if you're an organization that has a lot of Cisco product. So that's one where you get into more specifics. You're really getting more out of the generalization and getting into more of the specialization. And in most organizations that have a lot of security professionals, there are usually groups of people that have specialization. So here's our SIM expert, here's our firewall expert, here's the person who is the malware expert. So they're handling the malware guys handling the new malware signatures and the sandboxing and the things coming in through our cloud-based scanner. We've got the firewall person who's handling IPsec and SSL decryption and managing the firewall rules and any type of IDS that might be built into that. And you've got somebody doing a SIM that's gathering all the metrics and gathering log files from all of your servers and all of your switches and all of your routers and all your firewalls and putting those together and correlating information. So you can already see just those three roles, which are not even all the roles you need to know in security. Just those three roles have a massive amount of things that you would need to know to be able to manage them properly. So that's where you really get into those pieces and understanding those. Department of Defense has a significant list of certifications that you are expected to know to fit into particular roles within the Department of Defense. And it's not just Cisco, but it's a number of other organizations as well. Cisco is just a big company that happens to have a lot of certs, but so does Microsoft, and so does Palo Alto and Checkpoint and all these other organizations as well. Obviously, Cisco is just a big company in general. So you would find, in fact, Cisco probably not the strongest on security, though. Cisco absolutely the strongest or one of the strongest when it comes to routing and switching, but they're definitely not on the leading edge of security these days. Certainly not. They're well behind along those lines. They missed the boat. I think they decided about 6 years ago, they came out with a new restructuring that had nothing to do with security. And I think that's hurt them in the long run. The older version of the Security Plus exam did not have any type of performance-based questions. So there's not a lot of command line on the Security Plus, but there obviously are performance-based questions on the Security Plus. So you might be given, here's one I thought of the other day, and I was looking at creating this for the event today. You may be given a list of, I was looking at the volatility of data. So there's a chart and a list of things you need to know because certain data is more volatile than others. If you arrive on scene of an attack, what information do you grab first because it's going to go away first? So things in memory, for instance, in RAM that are being executed are much more volatile than something that might be a temporary file on your hard drive, which are much more volatile or more volatile than a file that is stored on the hard drive as a separate operating system file, for instance. So you have these different types of data that you might want to put in order between what is most volatile and least volatile. That was a performance-based question that seems relatively obvious when you start looking at the exam objectives. So that's one I was thinking of actually adding to, and I obviously can't do performance-based questions in the method that we have here, but maybe just doing an example of one. Maybe we wouldn't follow along with Socrative, but we could think about it on the screen and line it up and figure out which would go first, which would go second, which would go third. There is a list of Department of Defense certifications that they look for. Of course, there's a list. If there's nothing that our Department of Defense does better, it's create documentation. And I should find that list. I had it because it is a standard in. Let's find that list. I bet I can find it because I've been there before. I think it's the DoD 8570. It is. Department of Defense, DoD 8570 is the thing we're looking for. If you go into the Google machine and you type DoD 8570, you will see plenty. You will not only see the Department of Defense documents, you will see the organizations that go through and help you understand what the Department of Defense documents are actually saying. So that's what you're going to want to type in is DoD 8570. There's a lot of good ones. SANS has a good explanation of that. CompTIA has an explanation of that. ISC squared has an explanation of that. So there's plenty of places. And of course, the ones with the .mil at the end are going to have a breakdown of that. The 8570, which is, do I have a picture of this? The Information Assurance Workforce Improvement Program. And it breaks down all of the things that you'll never want to read about all of the different, look, it goes through all the different levels. What do you have to know to be an Information Assurance Technical Level 1, Technical Level 2, Technical Level 3? And this document itself goes through what all those might be. If I go pass through a lot of these pages, let's see what we have here. And it goes through what all of the different things you would need to know. I don't know if this document tells you the exact certs, but a number of the other third-party websites will take these requirements and map them back to the certs so that you can then find those pieces as well. That comes in handy too. I like working with those. Well, let's go to the calls. We've got this phone line system up, so we'll go to the 404 area code. Are you there, caller?
How you doing?
Hey, what's your name?
Hey, this is John.
Hey, John.
I just had a real quick question about the. Do you have any idea what types of performance-based questions? I know you just named one with the volatility of data and whatnot.
Yep.
I guess when I took the Network Plus, that was my my biggest worry was performance-based. I could fly right through the multiple choice, but the performance-based kind of got me.
That's one of the things I always worry about too when I'm walking into exam, because a lot of companies have these, they call them performance-based questions. Some companies have just pure SIMs. If you take a Cisco set of certifications, they have one where they just put you on a screen. There's a bunch of routers and switches, and you have to type things in and figure things out on your own. And it's, for me, I agree, that's one of the most challenging pieces. Makes me crazy because you don't know what to expect. Unfortunately, with the Security Plus exam, if you take the exam, you have to digitally sign a document that says, I'm not going to talk about this exam. It's a non-disclosure agreement as a candidate where anything that you learn about during that exam, you can't tell anybody. So I can't tell you what might have been seen from a performance-based question perspective. Most people should not tell you that information. I've seen people talk about it online, and I think if you were to look around, you would see that some people do let some of the information out of the bag a bit, which they shouldn't do. It's against the things that they have signed, the agreement that they've made with CompTIA to do that. The example I gave to you is one I thought up in my head. It might even be on the exam. I have no idea. I don't have a list of all of their performance-based questions because I don't want to say something wrong to someone else. But I could come up with 5 or 6 just in my head of what you might see. CompTIA does have a video that describes the type of performance-based questions they're going to ask. So they'll ask you, they could ask you, fill in the blank, multiple choice. They could ask you matching. They could show you an image and ask you what the image is. They could pop you down to a command prompt. There's not a lot of command prompts on the Security Plus, but they could ask you some of those things. And certainly you should be prepared for what those might be. I think as a good rule of thumb, though, if you know the content, then when somebody prompts you to use that content in something other than a multiple choice question, you should be able to do that. These are just different question types. It's a matching, it's a fill in the blank, or a multiple choice. I mean, a multiple choice has the same thing. I have to think about the question. Oh, you're asking me about user input, and you're asking me about random data sent to user input. Oh, what is that? That's fuzzing. Okay, let me go find the fuzzing part. We did that as a multiple choice in the study group, but it could just as easily been applied towards a fill in the blank question for a performance-based question.
Right.
So I don't have any specifics for you,
yeah,
unfortunately. It's one of those where you just have to know the content, and if you walk in, you should be able to apply that content to whatever type of question you'll be faced with.
Right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that.
Good luck with it.
All right.
There is a lot of questions I get about the performance-based questions. I think I got in the latest list, because when you register for this, you get I ask you for questions. So you brought up a lot of questions for me. I'm going to bring these up on my screen to see it. And a lot of these were about performance-based questions, because I agree with John. It drives you crazy because you don't know what you're going to be faced with when you walk in the exam. You study all this material, and then all of a sudden you get a performance-based question you just were not ready for. And that's just part of the exam. It's just part of understanding this material really, really, really well so that you can then apply it across whatever type of question is going to be asked. A lot of the questions I got this month were related to encryption and decryption. It's that last section of the Security Plus exam on cryptography. And I think next time we'll do a lot of cryptography because of that. I wasn't able to create a ton of cryptographic things. We did the security or the certificate authority this time, so we could talk about what that was for and how it was not used for any type of encryption. It's used for signing things for trust. So that's one of the things that was important. But we need to do more of this cryptography. We didn't do very much this month. We will do more next month, I promise. And for those of you wondering, there is a list of events on my website at professormesser.com/calendar, and you can see when the next study group is going to be for those pieces. If you're someone who's watching this on the replay, you can call this number and you can leave your question as part of this, and I can play it back during the study group as well. So even if you're not watching live, you can still send me an email or call into this number and just leave a message for me. I'm the one that gets these messages as well with those pieces. Yeah, it's true. You don't have to assume anything on this exam. The chat room's wondering, what if I'm going to be asked something I'm not prepared for? The exam objectives are so detailed. They are so clear. CompTIA, I think, is really the only company that gives you this level of detail in your exam objectives. They tell you everything you need to know. If you know everything in that list, you're good. You're going to pass your exam. There's no question. Everything is there for that piece. There's really no room, not a lot of room for error. They're so detailed in their exam objectives. So make sure you look through those, and you'll see it's very obvious. All of my videos go to the exam objectives word for word and take exactly what they're asking you for and putting it right there. There's really nothing that you're going to miss. If you know what's in the exam objectives, you'll do fine. I know that there is a section at the top of the exam objectives where they do say, we could ask you anything. And it's true, they could indeed ask you anything. But they don't do that. They don't really go off that list very much at all for those pieces. I think that's really the case for those and being able to work with them. There are a lot of things for those. A question that came in about sort of careers and what to do. Sort of, we talked about certifications earlier, and a question came in on the chat room that was discussing more about penetration testing. And I think this is something that that tends to be over accentuated in the security industry. And I'm speaking as someone who's been in the security industry, started with a startup about 6.5, 7 years ago, and stayed there for 6.5 years, and went to some of the biggest companies in the world, talking to their security teams specifically, and learning about how different organizations handled security in their environments. Mine was specifically around firewall, but because of the type of firewall I was using, I got to talk with many different people on the Microsoft server side, talking with the intrusion prevention, talking with cloud-based services, software-defined networks, being able to understand more about what people are doing with firewalls. And in our industry, there tends to be a lot of classes and talk about penetration testing and pen testing. Penetration testing, obviously, is when you are on the outside of a network. Generally, you're outside the network and you're trying to get into the network and attack individual systems and find a way in. And it's certainly sexy. It's absolutely sounds like a blast, a ton of fun. And it is to be able to do that. Before I started doing these videos, I wrote a book on Nmap. And Nmap obviously is a tool that's used by many people to do recon and learn more, and in many cases perform tests, penetration tests against different kinds of devices. There is there's a lot of people that are interested in pen testing because it's really cool and it sounds cool and exciting. But the vast majority of what you do as a network security professional has very little to do with penetration testing. That's more of a niche service or product that a third party would provide to an organization. Now, many organizations do pen testing internally, and certainly you should understand the nuances of pen testing. A lot of companies that do credit card and are subject to PCI, DSS, do a lot of internal pen testing. There's a lot of great tools out there, and I talk about a lot of them in my videos, to do this penetration testing internally. And they'll come to me and say, your firewall failed this particular penetration test, and it turns out the penetration test was flawed in what it was doing. Those scannings and penetration testings are pretty important, but they are in no way the day-to-day that most network professionals in security are dealing with. It's just not something you run into very much. So I think it's useful to know. It's certainly there is organizations that have people that do penetration testing 24/7. They fly all over the world and they perform penetration testing in different environments. There's not a lot of those compared to the rest of the security industry. However, it is definitely a niche to be able to focus on. So let's shift gears a bit. Chat room's asking about spanning tree. So there's a diagram that I have that shows the bridges between different networks. And I mentioned switches a few times in there as well. And there's a few reasons behind that. It has to do with really history. There is in the world of switching, there was a time when there were no switches. I know, who would have thought, but there was actually a time on networks when there was no such thing as a switch. Well, there sort of was really though, and we called it a bridge. In most networks back in the day, and we're talking 1990s timeframe, so well before Y2K, well before the year 2000, we still had separate network segments, and we had to get data from one network segment to the other. Routers at the time were costly. You didn't have routers in an operating system, or if you did, it was Novell and it had limited functionality. And third-party routers were expensive, so you didn't really put a lot of routers in your environment. Most everything was being run on hubs and bridges. Bridges usually had 2 to 4 interfaces on them. These were not devices with a large number of interfaces on them. So you can plug in 4 networks, and you can bridge between those 4 networks. And what a bridge did, it made its forwarding decisions based on the MAC address of the devices. So it knew where all the devices were, had a big table of MAC addresses, and knew what MAC addresses were on interface 1, what MAC addresses were on interface 2, interface 3, and interface 4. When traffic came into the device, it determined where it would be sending that information based on these MAC addresses. If it sounds like I was just describing a switch, it's because I did. A bridge and a switch are functionally exactly the same thing. But you obviously in switching, these bridges did everything in software, generally did everything in software. When switches were created, they were able to take that functionality of determining where traffic went based on MAC address and put it into hardware, put it into ASICs. These ASICs were able to do this at very high rates of speed and across many different interfaces simultaneously. So we effectively pulled out our hubs and replaced them with multi-port bridges. You can think of it this way, with many ports. So you have 32-port switch, 64-port switch. You could easily just to say that's a 32-port bridge. That's a 64-port bridge. That's a 144-port bridge, because that's what it is. A bridge and a switch are exactly the same thing. The terms are synonymous. So when I use those terms when I'm talking about spanning tree, and I sometimes will slip and I'll use bridge in one sentence and I'll use switch in the other sentence, it's exactly the same functionality. It's exactly the same device. It's exactly the same thing. So the 802.1d, the spanning tree functionality or the rapid spanning tree functionality that most people are using these days, are all done on switches. These are not on routers. Routers do not participate in spanning tree. Routers don't do anything with spanning tree. That's layer 3. That's well outside the scope of what spanning tree works with. Spanning tree is a layer 2, OSI layer 2 functionality. So when you're working with this spanning tree, it's always going to be on a switch. It's always going to be on a bridge. It's never going to be on a router doing layer 3, because spanning tree is not a layer 3 functionality. Should I turn on the fire? I can turn on the fire. It would get very hot in here to be able to do that, to have it there. But in the summer, I'll make sure to turn it on. ASICs, I mentioned that these bridges, these multi-port switches were created because of ASICs. Those are application-specific integrated circuits. ASIC, ASIC. And in fact, now that you've got switches, firewalls now have ASICs. You've got ASICs in so many networking devices, because it effectively takes what we had in software, burns it into this processor that has one functionality, and they stick it in a box, and it does this one thing, and it does it very well and very fast. They're very, very useful to be able to do that. In fact, there's also sort of the next step of those are processors that are custom processors that you can program in a device that have effectively the same throughput, just under the throughput of what an ASIC might have these days. And we're seeing more and more programmable processors as we do ASICs, it seems, these days. It's a never-ending series of technologies that build it up. So when I talk about spanning tree, and I talk about having bridges and having switches, it's exactly the same thing. Many switches, certainly enterprise switches these days, support spanning tree. And all of the switches that I have at my studio all have spanning tree enabled. They all use spanning tree. And so most people will do that. If you have that's the case. So in the chat room, Benny says, so if you have a home router, and it has these switch ports on the back of it. You ever see these routers that got this? I can probably pull up a picture of one on here as well, so you can see it. But you've got this router. Maybe it's a wireless router. You're plugging it into your ISP, and on the back of it are Ethernet connections. So usually these yellow Ethernet interfaces that are on the back, and those are switch ports. But if you look at the configuration of these small home routers, those 4 switch ports, you have basically zero manageability of those interfaces. There's not going to be spanning tree, because they're naturally assuming that you've not got another switch somewhere that you'll loop back. And if you do, that's an easy one. You got 4 ports. How hard is it to figure out where your loop is if you only have 4 ports? So you really don't have that is an unmanaged switch in the very classic sense, because there's no manageability of those switch ports at all. In fact, in my network, I have a separate router to my ISP that's plugging into a separate switch, a managed switch, and I actually have a separate wireless access point that is a router, but I don't use the router functionality. I don't plug into the WAN port. I only use it to provide that capability there. No, I have Cisco switches. I have real devices. I have real switches in my network to be able to do the thing. Because, of course, I want to do crazy stuff. I've got link aggregation. There is a lot of storage devices. I need high bandwidths to those devices. There's a lot that I have to... And, of course, why would I have a simple unmanaged? Of course, I'm going to have a managed switch in my environment to be able to do that and be able to work with those pieces. That's one of the challenges with those. So let's look at the questions that you sent to me this month on the premiere. Thank you for attending this premiere episode of the Security Plus study group. It was a lot of fun to put together. I'm glad I was able to make that happen. A lot of people were asking questions about the exam itself. Like, I'm a beginner. I'm starting with security. What do I do? And I think the Security Plus exam is a pretty good one to start with. It gives you a very nice overview. Microsoft has an entry-level security exam. Cisco has an entry-level security exam, those types of things. And I think if you're getting into security, you should always think back about how much network you know. Because if you know network, we can teach you security. If you only know security, now we have to go back and teach you the network part. And that's much harder to do. And you're not going to be able to apply or understand a lot of the details of the security until you understand the networking piece, so that you can understand how to implement your layer 2 firewall that you've built and created. How do you put that into your network? How do you still allow it to participate in spanning tree? Those things are important to be able to do that and have it there. I think that's one that not enough people really do or worry about, are the pieces with the networking side of it. And I think if you do, spend your efforts into learning the network piece, then get into the security piece. I understand, however, and we were just talking about Department of Defense, a lot of the minimum requirements for DoD here in the United States start with Security Plus. So that was another reason I wanted to do these study groups, is a lot of you aren't doing A+, you're not doing Network Plus, you need Security Plus. And you've come to my site solely for Security Plus because you have to have that to keep your job or to get a job with the federal government. So I understand that as well. And in those cases, obviously, you would start with Security Plus. That's a very good entry level into the security side. There's nothing incredibly technical. You're not setting up spanning tree. You're not configuring layer 3 firewalls. You're doing very basic, how do I understand the flow of traffic through a firewall? If I needed to create a firewall rule to stop a certain port number, what would that look like? That's about as detailed as you can get with the firewall pieces for those. I think that's another good one to work with for those pieces. Let's go back to the questions you sent me, because I've got some time here and my voice is still holding out. How do these big corporations keep getting hacked? That was actually a exceptional question being sent in on the study group from Joshua. And it is remarkable how prevalent the malware really is. So I came from as I mentioned, a next generation firewall company that also had some scanning in the cloud of executables. So if you had somebody downloading an executable, that executable can be sent up to the cloud to a sandbox. You can run that executable on machines that are in the cloud that have nothing to do with the ones that you have in your organization to see what it does. And it runs the executable, determines if that executable is malware, and then informs you that indeed it's malware, creates a signature, and then puts it on all of the firewalls all over the world so that if anybody else sees that executable, they'll have a signature that will prevent it. But what we found that was really interesting is that this malware, there was new malware every day. Every organization I went to, big and small, saw zero-day malware every day. It was incredibly prevalent. Now, I don't know what's happened in the last 4 months, but I can't imagine that it's gotten less malware. That would just be crazy. This malware that's out there is remarkable in that it is constant flows of executables coming in, generally through email. The executables that are coming in are definitely malware that no antivirus company has ever seen before. So it's brand new malware. And in some cases, the malware is one that when it is sent, it is automatically created as a new executable to try to avoid a lot of the antivirus and anti-malware companies. So already you found zero-day malware and it's coming to your organization, at least to some level. And now the clock starts ticking. How long does it take to get an antivirus and anti-malware company to create a signature for that? Well, first they have to get their hands on that malware. They have to be able to create a signature for it, test the signature, do quality assurance, and then push that signature out to you. So you would think it probably takes about a day. What we were finding is 3 or 4 days before that particular piece of malware was even identified as being bad. And that's because it had something that was common with another piece that was seen somewhere else. That's a long time to wait around. So 3 or 4 days go by and this malware can be sent anywhere in the world that wasn't protected with these same sandboxes in the cloud, and it was getting infected everywhere. It's so easy to make that happen and have this malware come through. In the cases of the big ones, of the Targets, of the ones where the Home Depots of the world, they're going after anything they can to get into the network. In the case of Target, they went in through the company that handles air conditioning, the vendor. They sent them an email with a PDF. The PDF had malware, infected the local machine, hopped onto the Target network. The vendor network was not segmented from the rest of the network, so they had full access to every store. So easy to make that happen. I think that when you start getting into those pieces of where the bad guys are getting in, it's things like that. They're getting in through individual malware that's on a system, and they're hopping into the rest of the network from there. They're not hacking in from the outside. They're not doing penetration tests to find an open port that lets them into the inside of the network. The security people have gotten very, very good at creating the wall around the network. They've got firewalls, intrusion prevention, antivirus, network-based antivirus, anti-spam. They've got all of these pieces, and they do an exceptional job of only allowing in what needs to come in. There's not a lot of open holes in people's networks any longer. So they're not doing that. They're not sitting there and doing penetration testing and trying to hack into your network. They are going directly to your user, getting them to click a link, sending them an email with an executable, and just waiting for them to click. And it's so easy to get in that way. And that's how they're getting into the inside of the networks to make that thing happen. I think that's where you really start getting into the details of trying to find it and stop it. Imagine trying to keep people from clicking on attachments. You can't do it. So you have to use some other type of security to be able to do that. You have to be able to there's new types of software that are being put in our operating systems that instead of looking for signatures of malware, they're looking for the subset of things that malware would do to gain access to your system. And in an operating system, there are less than 100 things, probably less than 50 things that malware does to find its way onto your system and attack it. If I can just stop those 50 things, I don't need a database of 3.5 million things. So that's exceptionally more easy. So I think as the years are going to go on, as that technology matures, you're going to see more and more of that being rolled out. We no longer would need to have antivirus signatures so much as we have ways to watch what's happening inside of our computer, which is pretty awesome. I think that's a really nice way to do that. And I think we're going to see more and more and more of that. There's already companies doing that kind of thing today on enterprise networks. They're sitting there, and that's what the software is. It sits there and waits for those things to happen. Very, very useful. Okay, back to our questions. There is a number of things for those of you sending these things in. The chat room people are, how can you experiment with the next generation firewall? Well, you'd have to go find a next generation firewall and get these companies to give you one, I would think. It's not something you can download. There's no open source next generation firewall. But a lot of the next generation firewall companies, I'll take Palo Alto Networks because I was most familiar with Palo Alto Networks. There's a virtual version of the firewall. And the virtualized version is one where you can load it in any VM and run it. It was ideally meant to go on very large enterprise virtualized networks. In the Security Plus, and I think the latest Network Plus that I just finished, there is a section in the Network Plus exam objectives that talks about virtual environments and how virtual firewalls are implemented in those virtual environments. And those are very easy to get your hands on if you talk to the vendor and say, I'm trying to learn more about your product. Some of them even have download links. I just want to download the virtual environment, the virtual machine, and load it up and try it myself, and then give you licensing. But those are relatively complex pieces of software and hardware in some cases. And it's not something you just turn on and go, okay, I got a firewall. There's a lot of setup that goes into those pieces and makes it happen, which is another good reason that as a security professional, you need to know that piece, because you're going to be setting up virtual wire configurations, layer 2 configurations, layer 3 configurations. You have to know routing. You have to know subnetting. You have to understand routing protocols. How does OSPF work? How do I configure a BGP? How do I do the route redistribution? How do I set all of that up and work with IPsec, especially if the IPsec is one that determines where it goes based on the routes? So it just goes on and on and on and on. Those are the things that it's about security. It's almost as much about networking. Can't say that enough for those pieces. CompTIA does have the CASP is another higher level security certification. I haven't looked lately to see how well that is being received. It would be interesting to see how many people looking for jobs, looking for people to fill jobs, have that as one of the requirements of the CASP certification. Be interesting to. I should do some more research. I'll make a note, and I'll go out and look at those things to be able to work with that. One of the things I also got a lot of questions about was different ways to take advantage of these vulnerabilities. So a lot of people were talking about database injections. How does that work? Buffer overflows. How does that work? Brute force. How does that work? And I demonstrate some of these in my videos, but we should do that in another study group too. Go through and do a database injection. There are many ways to do this internally on your own systems. And I think for my Security Plus pieces, I used, let me see if I can find the one I used. I'm trying to remember exactly the name. I used WebGoat. WebGoat. That's right. WebGoat. The WebGoat project from OWASP. I'll show you what that looks like. Here's WebGoat. Yes, I said goat. G-O-A-T. Goat. WebGoat 6. Oh, they're already working on WebGoat 6. That's the latest one. I don't think I've even seen that one yet. And WebGoat is the one where they've effectively created an insecure environment. And they want you to use this insecure environment to hack it. Well, what a great thing to do. That sounds like a lot of fun. Go into the environment, and it's already set up with databases. And the databases can, and the applications are susceptible to database injections and buffer overflows and a lot of other things as well. So that's a good one to go through, and you can find a lot of vulnerabilities and way to look at and attack systems using WebGoat. And a lot of the demonstrations I do in my Security Plus course, I'm demonstrating with WebGoat because it's just so easy. And they even have in their documentation, here's how you take advantage of this, how to download and run it. And there's plenty of videos and documentation on the internet that takes you through how to hack the quote unquote hack. You're not really hacking. It's a way to, you can try to do the same things the hackers do. It's kind of hard to hack when it's already set up for you to hack it. I guess technically it's hacking. But it's a lot of fun to play around with as well. Just as I was able to load up that VM and do fuzzing, boom, I'm now fuzzing this app. They give you that to be able to work with in those pieces too. And have that there. Some of you were asking about my all white Rubik's Cube. And it is all white, isn't it? It's a Rubik's Cube where I've got, it's an electronic Rubik's Cube. So it's not lit up right now. I don't even know if it's charged. Is it charged? Let's find out. Let's see if I can grab that. Unplug myself. And it is not. not charged up. Normally it would be lighting. There's a power button on here somewhere. There it is. But it's not charged up. There's a battery in here. And then it would flicker, and you can simply slide your finger to change the Rubik's Cube. That's what that is. Now it's gone. Now it's like the whole backdrop is now messed up. The whole thing is gone awry. The whole Zen is not working there anymore for those pieces. So some of you also, other questions from the chat room. You want to know what certifications to get in security. And we talked a little bit about this earlier. You can just rewind to earlier on in this second hour, where we talked about the differences between Sega SSP and CEH and all of those others. Does come in handy to be able to have a list of what those certifications are. And I think ultimately the best certifications are going to be the ones the employers are looking for, if that's your point. But if you are, everybody has different requirements. When you get up to the security level, are you trying to get a job in security? Are you trying to move into a different security role? Are you trying to move from one company to another? Different companies are looking for different certifications. So it may be one of those cases where you're going to want to find out what's going to work for you as an individual, and that's the place you're going to want to go with that. I think that's really the best place to go for those pieces. That's I think one of the ways where I start looking at what do I do next. And as I went through my career, it happened every time I sat down and tried to figure out what am I doing next in my career. Is a certification going to be the thing that's going to help me? And which certification is that going to be? And when you get into security, as I mentioned, you do start getting into these situations where the certifications you get are going to be dictated by your employer. And that's what happened to me. So I went to these different companies that had their own certification. That's the one you're going to get. And I would say, well, don't you want me to get maybe a certification from a different manufacturer? Nope, we want you to get this one. Okay, that's the one I got. Great. And ultimately that was the right decision because that kept me employed. I think that's probably the best way to do that for those pieces. There's quite a bit to go through and deal with certification. There's no one single answer, especially for security. But as a highlight, the CISSP was really the one that most people are talking with, dealing with. That's the one that most people are going after, and then everything else is based off of that. Let's go to the phone lines. The 910 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Uh-oh. Is he there? I think he's gone. Hopefully I didn't hit the wrong button. You were there for a second. Well, if you're still there, you can call back. I'll put you on there very quickly. I'm my own call screener. I can do that very, very quickly. There is a great way to go through and look at those pieces. Where's this call? Let's go look at. Maybe I can see the 910. Are you there, caller? Did I click the talk button there? Let's see if we can talk to you. Hi, are you there, caller?
Yeah.
There he is. Hey,
Hi.
what's your name?
I'm here. My name is Alfred.
Hey, Alfred. What can we do for you today?
Yes, I wanted to ask a question about how a lot of the devices that we have now, pretty much are able to access the internet, and how are those devices? Because a lot of them were made not with security in mind,
Right.
and a lot of, you know what I mean, and a lot of people are taking those devices to work, and they're able to download emails, access documents, and things like that. So how are those personal devices affecting the network, basically, and how can you prevent that?
Yeah, and that was one of the hugest concerns. Actually, that concerns goes back to well before our modern mobile devices. And I think when the iPhone came along, that was a bit of a game changer, obviously, in the mobile phone industry. Before that, everybody had BlackBerries. That was what you had when you were at an enterprise, is you had your BlackBerry. The BlackBerry, obviously not as popular these days, but one of the things that they promoted, and one of the things that I guess was the advantage for them, was first a very secure communication between you and the BlackBerry enterprise server and your internal corporate email. And so there was a very specific secure channel between all of those different devices, and any third-party applications were at that point written in Java, and Java itself prevented access to other data on the device, and the way that was implemented on the BlackBerry prevented access to other data on the device as well. But then the iPhone came along, and the tablets came along, and Android came along, and now Microsoft and their tablet products and mobile products have come along. And all of these have the same problem you're discussing, is that there are vulnerabilities in the operating systems of these devices. There's vulnerabilities in the applications running on these devices, and we're finding new ones all the time. The way that most organizations are dealing with this is they've got this weird situation. It used to be that companies would give you the device. They would give you the phone. They would buy the phone, they'd buy the BlackBerry, and they'd give it to you. Hardly anybody does that anymore. You bring your own device to work. You BYOD, bring your own device. And that BYOD device now is owned by you, but it needs access to the corporate network. And the way that most organizations are securing the device for the corporation, but allowing you to use the device as a user and a person outside of work, is they're using some type of mobile device manager, or MDM. These mobile device managers, at least the newer ones, allow you to effectively partition off a section of your mobile device that's used for corporate purposes. So it's effectively creating its own little world inside of your mobile device. And inside that little world are the applications that are okay to use on your corporate network. So it might be a browser, and it might be a corporate app, or whatever other things you need to have to be able to run on your corporate network. The other part of your phone and mobile device is outside of the scope of the mobile device manager. So your employer can manage all of the data on your business side, but leave the rest of it up to you. And that way, if you were to leave the company, they can just delete your partition, their customer and company data, and leave the rest of your device completely available to you without you losing anything. Older mobile device managers, it was an all or nothing. You'd have to delete the whole phone, and then finally you could regain access to that. But these days they're able to partition it out quite nicely. And because of that, the operating systems of these mobile devices as well are designed so that applications that are running on the device can't access data from other parts of the device without your express permission. So if there's an application, and you've probably seen this, you've loaded up an application that does photo editing, and the first thing it asks you is, I need access to your photos. Can I have that access, please? And you have to tell it, yes, you may have access, because the operating system doesn't allow it access. And that's one way that you're able to minimize the impact of malware, because the malware would have nowhere to go unless you allowed it access to that data. Does that help at least a little bit give you a perspective into how people are managing that? It seems that I have bored him to death. He's over it. That's one of the things, though, whenever I start looking at, yeah, he did drop. One of the things that mobile device managers is pretty hot. That's a pretty hot segment. Mobile device management, the implementation of mobile devices, how people keep track of where the mobile devices are. You're trusting your employer quite a bit at this point. They know where you are. They know when the last time all of these devices, they check in with the mobile device manager periodically. So they know GPS, where you happen to be. They know where these devices are, and they need to, because your corporate data is on these devices. If those devices go away, then you can nuke that device. If it's stolen, well, I know where it is, so I can delete everything on that device. There's quite a lot of nice functionality there to be able to do that. And I think that's one of the things that helps a lot when you start looking at mobile device management. There's a lot of different functions. And I think a lot of hospitals, financial companies, they were the first ones to implement MDM, and now you see it everywhere. That's really where, when you're doing MDM, what's most important with those pieces. One question that did come in the chat room before I go back to calls, somebody got a job 3 weeks ago, and they've given you 3 weeks to take the Security Plus exam. Now, what I find interesting about this, in this message sent to me, they got a job as an Oracle database administrator, and their employer is giving them 3 weeks to take the Security Plus exam. Now, I know a lot of database administrators through the years. I've worked with a lot of database administrators. But usually when you're a database administrator, you didn't really come from the network side. You had a little bit of security, but it's really more application side and understanding databases, which is a very different world than networking and security. 3 weeks to take the Security Plus exam is not a lot of time. That's a ridiculous amount of time, actually. That's an employer who has no idea the scope of the Security Plus exam. So point them back to this video and maybe to the exact time stamp on the video so that I could tell them that the Security Plus exam is one of the most comprehensive exams in our industry for content. My course notes, which are not a book, they're not any type of extensive explanation of the content of the exam, is 36 pages long. Course notes, and very detailed, very intricate course notes. This is not an exam you can sit down, read a book, and you're ready to take it. And certainly not in 3 weeks. There's just too much content. I think that if you were someone that was studying for this exam, a minimum, if you had some experience in technology, I would think would be around 6 weeks. I think that's a pretty good number, especially if you've got a job, a family, other responsibilities. It's very difficult to do this in 3 weeks. All I can really recommend, read everything you can read, watch all the videos you can do. Maybe your employer is giving you 3 weeks off because that makes sense. Not. Of course they wouldn't do that. You would almost need, in the chat room, somebody says, make them pay for a boot camp, or just show them how much a boot camp costs. You go away for a week just to learn Security Plus, and you're talking about thousands of dollars, usually $2,500, $3,000 just to go to a boot camp for a week. And that's still not going to give you everything you need to know to pass that exam. That's usually the last thing you would go through. So I would recommend that that you ask the employer they gave you 2 weeks and you pleaded for 3. That's even worse. This employer has no idea whatsoever about the Security Plus. Even more interestingly, for a job as a database administrator, which it may be that your particular role is one that has a requirement that you be Security Plus certified because of something you're doing with the federal government or with a third party, which is what it sounds like. Because generally a database administrator is not somebody I would insist have a Security Plus certification. I think, of course, it would help because you do have some scope into what the bad guys are doing to get access to the data. But just the Oracle database administration is much more complex than the information that you're getting from the Security Plus, which is more high-level security and not detailed security. There's all I can really recommend is read as much as you can in that very short period of time. Take as many notes as you can on that piece. It is as this chat room is telling you, it is a completely unrealistic expectation to think that anybody's going to pass the exam in 2 weeks, and 3 weeks isn't any better. You'll need at least twice that time, and that's for somebody who's already familiar with this content and these materials. There's just too much there. And yeah, if you need the exam to start the job, I suspect that's what it is there's some compliance that requires you have the Security Plus certification. And you're going to need to grab some of these really good Security Plus books. Go out to Amazon, read through the reviews, find some really good ones. I would get a couple of good books. Watch my videos. My videos themselves are extensive. I mean, we're talking about many videos in different hours. A lot that's there. So very, very difficult. Some of the chat from going, maybe they didn't want to hire you. I don't think that's the case. I think they want to hire you. I think there's just a requirement from somebody they work with, federal government or somebody else, and you're going to have to figure out how to make this work. That's just not a lot of time. And because I can tell from the information you're sending to me, this doesn't seem like a lot of time. No, it doesn't, because it isn't. I would say on average for the Security Plus certification, most people I think take it about 3 to 6 months before they take the exam. If you're more familiar with the technology, closer to 3, maybe 2. 6 weeks I could walk in and take it in a month. That kind of thing. Coming from the background, if I hadn't written the course, 6 weeks or a month would be something for somebody who already knew security. I just sat for an exam that was a firewall exam, and it was extensive, and I spent 2 months studying for that. And of course, that was, I had to work, family requirements, and that was someone who I knew the product already. I worked for the company, and I still took 2 months to figure out all the details, go through the specifics, really understand it well. I think that would be really the case. So good luck with that. My videos are 19 hours long. Just the videos to go through that piece are extensive. So that's why I think maybe you go back to them and say, that's not a lot of time. You can take it. Now, if they're going to pay for it, read as much as you can and go take it. You might be able to squeak by there. You're not going to know the content, but I don't think that's why they're asking you. I don't think they're asking you to become familiar with the intricacies of network security. I think they're trying to fulfill a check mark that people who are hired have a certain level of knowledge. And it's probably based on a third party they work with. So that's my recommendation. Read. Why are you here listening to me? You should be reading already. That's one of those challenges with those pieces. And good luck with that, because that's extensive amount of reading and content to try to get through. Now, fortunately, the Security Plus exam, if you understand the topics, it's a relatively straightforward exam. It's not a technical exam. You don't have to understand the intricacies of how routing protocols operate, but you do have very high-level security concerns. You have to understand non-repudiation. You have to understand IPsec. You have to understand when you would use a web application firewall, that type of thing. Yep, DoD compliance. There you go. See, called it. That's exactly what it is. So they are going to need you to have that certification. Don't worry so much about understanding every nuance. Go to the exam objectives, read through a book, go take those exams. Oh, and they didn't pay for it. That's awesome. Great. So that one's up to you. Well, I wish you all the luck in the world as you're studying for this. If there are any questions that come up or you're trying to figure out something or something's not making sense, please let me know. Go to the top of my website, go to the Contact Us link. It comes directly to me, and I'll be glad to reply back and do those pieces as well. Well, we've come to the end of a couple of hours of study group today. This has been a fantastic first run out of the study group. I can't thank everyone enough for coming to the initial very first episode of my Security Plus study group. As I mentioned, I do one of these every month. We do an A+ study group, a Network Plus study group, and a Security Plus study group every month. If you're watching this and you're wondering, when is the next study group? Go to professormesser.com/calendar. There's also a calendar link at the top of the page. And I think I've got the calendar also on the right side of every page on my website, so you can always find out when the next one of these happens to be. I want to thank everybody for coming. We'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everyone.